has there ever been an easier interview for anyone? I mean, Cat Williams just shot out of a cannon, dude.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Shannon, like, was trying to reel him back in the beginning, and at one point, he was just like, "Alright, I guess I just need to shut up and just let Cat go because he's not gonna stop." He was
Yeah,
relentless, he was planning on getting all of this off his chest.
it's difficult to make Shannon Sharp speechless. Cat Williams at most points during the interview did that, which I thought was so funny. Cat Williams had a purpose. He knew
For
what he
sure,
was doing. And
for sure.
I said on the last episode, he's a calculated individual. I think now comedians are coming out and being like, he's a smart guy, he knows what he's doing. But I think people have kind of underestimated here's how I said it. I said he typically stays out of the spotlight until he needs to be in the spotlight. And then
Right.
he just, like you said, goes full force and just drops bombs.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the things that people have been talking about is like, well, what was true about what he said? What was not true? I'll say this. The more I hear about, I want to point something out too. I was the first to talk about this. I was the, you can, there are receipts on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to point this out. But a lot of these comedians have since come out and talked about it. And they've questioned, what was true, what was not. And I think a lot of comedians are coming out a lot. I mean, I say a lot, but I mean, I've heard a few say that they don't think he's lying about most of it. They think he's being truthful. Now, he did say some things where I even was like, all right, really? Like saying like Harvey Weinstein offered to suck his dick to put him in a movie role, stuff like that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I talked to my wife about this. I was like, didn't he like to get his dick sucked? Was he really sucking dick to use his power? She was like, well, when you have that much power, why wouldn't you just do whatever you can to feel that powerful? I'm like, well, does sucking a dick really make you feel that powerful? I was like, I don't know. Especially Cat Williams' dick. No offense, Cat. Don't come at me, please. I don't want that smoke. But a lot of these guys are saying, I think most of it is true, which is funny because you've seen a lot of the people you've seen speaking out just about it. Some of them have stated, I wish he had talked about me. Like that's how impactful. Like the video has 60 million views or
Right.
whatever it is, like 60 million and counting. I think it's probably more. It was 60 million like 2 days ago. So he knew what he was doing and all of his ticket sales. I mean, he sold out every show on this next tour. He's added shows. So he's a master marketer if that's what he was doing it for. I also think if he was doing it for that, fine. But I also think he just, hey, somebody wronged me or somebody said something that I don't agree with. Let me go ahead and address it. And I know because you haven't heard from me in a while, people will pay attention, that type of thing.
Weird thing is most of these people that he's talking about, this is like 10, 15, 20 years ago stuff. I mean, like the whole Cedric the
Yeah.
Entertainer thing, like that was like early 2000s, wasn't it? Or was that late 90s?
It was, but Cedric the Entertainer was recently on Shannon Sharp's podcast talking about it.
Right. Right. And that
So,
was kind of like almost uncomfortable too, because he was almost like bad mouthing Shannon Sharp when it wasn't really Shannon Sharp's, like it
I
wasn't
mean,
his. Because
I
he
get
was
what he
like,
was
"Oh"
doing.
yeah, because he was kinda like, "Well, why how could you let these people come on and lie to and lie on your show?" And he's like, "Well, how is that my fault? Like, they come on and they say what they're gonna say. I can't I don't in the moment, I think they're telling me the truth." You know what I mean? Like, that makes no
Well,
sense.
that's the thing. You have two ways of, well, look, you and I do a podcast. We don't have guests that often, and we certainly don't have guests of the stature of a Cat Williams. But some of these guys who have podcasts, especially in the entertainment world, when they have somebody on who makes claims to whatever, the ones that truly want the clicks and want the attention will call them on it. But a
Right.
lot of these guys are afraid to do so. I'm not saying Shannon Sharp was afraid to do so. I think Shannon Sharp also plays a role where he's like, I just want to be a part of the community. And I think a lot of those guys go on the podcast, they're like, yeah, that's Shannon. Let me go talk to Shannon for a little bit, not thinking that he's going to really call them on anything that they say.
I think Shannon's also smart enough to realize at the very beginning of that I don't have to do much here. Like, this is going to be
100%.
gold. This is going to be gold. All I have to do is let him roll. And
Yeah.
and I could make this worse. Like, all I want to do is let him do his own thing.
Yeah. But at what point do you question? So, like, he starts talking about Kevin Hart. And I've heard comedians say, like, albeit, did it come from a sort of nasty place when he was talking about Kevin Hart? Perhaps. But I've heard a lot of comedians be like, he wasn't wrong. But what he was saying about Kevin Hart, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. He called him an industry plant, and the main reason he brought it up, And again, if you do your historical checks on this, you know, there was I guess a documentary that came out about Fat Tuesdays at the Comedy Store, which was the historical urban night or black night, however you want to call it, at the Comedy Store. You know, Katt Williams was one of the guys who regularly was a part of that show. And they did this documentary and they mentioned names like Kevin Hart. And Katt was like, Kevin Hart was never a part of that. Kevin Hart was in New York while that was going on. So
Right.
why they mentioned him? Like, I understand he eventually came to LA and became Kevin Hart, but he didn't do that through the Comedy Store. So he was being very protective of his territory, and everybody's like that. So I've heard a lot of comedians be like, yeah, I mean, Katt's not necessarily wrong about that. Did he have to say it? Maybe not, but we're all talking about it, so he wins.
But
Uh,
he also kept saying talking about gatekeepers, and like people keep trying to say there's no gatekeepers in the industry, but he's
yeah.
like, but there seems to be a lot, and in my opinion, like these guys are the ones that are holding the key for most people to get things done and to succeed in their career. And he's calling out some of the biggest names. I mean, Kevin Hart is one of the biggest names in comedy. Um,
Oh, without a
I,
doubt.
I mean, in I guess the film industry more than stand up, but stand up too. I mean, so
I mean, I would argue that he's the top of both, to
yeah,
be honest. I mean, but when it comes to Katt Williams has maintained through all the controversy that he's maintained his career. And I mean, he still sells out everywhere he goes. He still has a rabid fan base that love him. And that's all through stand up. I mean, he's had the movie roles, he's had the appearances, he's done all of these things, but it's literally we want to go watch you do stand up and tell jokes. He talks about having receipts for all this stuff. And I mean, like I said, a lot of these comedians have kind of backed him on it. Like, yeah, again, did he need to say it? Probably not, but he's not wrong. So with the Kevin Hart thing, kind of people had his back. With the Cedric the Entertainer thing, I, on the last episode, played like a back to back of like the bits. They're very similar. And I mean, I even remember because I used to watch Comic View on BET and I remember that Katt Williams bit. And then when I saw Cedric the Entertainer do it, I was like, in my, young drug induced state, being like, that's familiar. Back then, I was like, it's kind of the same, but it's not. But I also wasn't into well, I should say this. I hadn't done the sort of historical research into stand-up comedy back then as I have done now. So I definitely didn't have the knowledge to even second guess it or question it. But when he brought it up on the podcast, I was like, yeah, now that he's talking about it, and I know both bits so well because, like I said, I watched Comic View and I remember the Comic View bit for Katt and the Kings of Comedy. That movie is one of my favorite pieces of stand up, whatever, in history. It's so good. As you know, rest in peace, Bernie Mac from that DVD or movie or whatever. It's some of the best storytelling, joke telling, stand up comedy. As you know, Bernie Mac's he's like
Mhm.
my Mount Rushmore of stand up comedians. I thought Cedric the Entertainer was funny, entertaining during that, and I enjoyed it. It was fine. I also had like some allegiance because he's a St. Louis guy. So,
That's what I was gonna ask. Yeah, the St. Louis connection adds a
yeah, of
little
course.
bit to it. Yeah,
Look at St. Louis. I mean, that was a big thing.
yeah.
That Kings of Comedy tour was a huge thing. The only thing bigger was the blue collar comedy tour that, Larry the Cable Guy and Ron White and Foxworthy and what's the
Which
other
is that,
guy?
isn't it?
Bill Engvall? Engvall, is that how you say his name?
Yeah, Bill Engvall. Isn't that
Yeah,
the weirdest thing though? Is like those guys are the ones that Cat Williams traveled around with at the beginning of his career.
the blue collar guys.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, yes, but shock value. If you want to, but I think you also, well, here's why a guy like that blew up the way that he blew up. I think it's the same reason that guys like Dane Cook blew up the way that they did. There was the ability to adjust to an audience. So when Dane Cook started, he started to the normal stand-up comedy crowd through Boston, where he came up, and then eventually went out to LA. So he had to kind of work his way through that. But then once he started gaining some notoriety, he built his own fan base, much like Katt Williams did. And I think it's because he really did perform with people that he didn't fit in with at all. He's getting up on stage in a black wife beater with his spiked up, perfect hair, and he's not telling your sort of he's not telling you sort of like get in, get out, punchline, hit the punchline, get out, sort of stand up comedy jokes. He's more performing, which I think that's what Katt Williams does too. And it built them their own fan bases. So I think it's for some guys like that, if they're able to navigate those waters and work through that, it's huge for them. Now, obviously it's polar, you know, Cat Williams versus the blue collar comedy crowd and the fans, polar opposites. How does it even work?
Right.
Somehow he didn't get crucified and he's still here and he's still talking about it.
Well, I
So,
also don't know. I mean, that was early on, so that was before like Blue Collar Comedy Tour was a thing. So like, I don't know
right,
what kind of comedy those guys were doing. I know that like Larry the Cable Guy was going by his his actual name back then.
Dan
It-
Whitney.
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was the South connection. You know, they're all from that area. So there
Yeah.
was that. But at the same time, if you want to be one of the top stand-up comedians, we know this. And I think this is where I most connect music to stand-up comedy. If you want to be at the top, you're able to you should be able to perform for any crowd and walk away with some new fans.
Yeah.
And I think Cat Williams had a great way of doing that. I mean, I think he translated. I hate to keep comparing him to Dane Cook, but I think it's the energy and just the performing aspect of it that translated over to folks. It wasn't necessarily the jokes, wasn't necessarily who they were. It was just their ability to get on stage and perform. I know Dane Cook's been accused of, you know, stealing jokes from Louis C.K. and other people, and but when he was at his height, dude, nobody
Yeah.
worked a
Nobody
crowd
could touch him.
like Dane
Yeah.
Cook.
Right.
Not
Right.
even close. And he was a master marketer, you know, using MySpace and, you know, guys today talk about YouTube clips and TikTok clips like they've originated this idea like quick clips. This is how we do it. It's like Dan Cook was doing that on MySpace.
Yeah.
I remember I had Dan Cook clips on my MySpace page.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, because he was the only one doing it.
yeah.
And I love stand-up comedy. I think occasionally you might find a Dave Attell clip, you know, and some other guys. But I mean, he was all over MySpace. So I just remember hearing a clip, hearing a bit, and thinking it was funny, and just putting it in the player with the music I had on the player at the time. Did people think I was a bro because of that? Probably, but that's fine. Whatever. I am a bro, but
What about, did you hear the one-off comment that Cat Williams made about Joe Rogan
I did. That's the other thing people are talking
him
about.
and him not having any funny friends on the show, basically, is what he said.
Yeah.
I don't know how to like. Do you think there's a like? Do you think there's a beef between him and Rogan, or you just don't think he likes Rogan, or do you think this empire that Rogan has built has maybe Cat looks at that in a bad way or something? I don't know. I'm just wondering where that comment came from.
Well, I think it comes from a real place. I think it comes from he knows that that's not his. I'm going to use the word demographic, even though that's probably not the right word
That's
to use.
that's what I was thinking. Yeah, it's like the other side of comedy from where he came from,
But he also
basically,
doesn't
right?
need Joe Rogan.
That's
You know, a
true.
lot of these guys that
Yeah.
go on Rogan think if they go on Rogan, now it's my time.
Yeah.
Kev
Right.
Williams doesn't need to go on. He doesn't need Joe. He doesn't need. Here's the other thing about stand up comedy and Joe Rogan. A lot of these guys think if they go on Joe Rogan and Joe Rogan gives them the stamp of approval of like, you're funny and his fans do it, then they're funny. Cat Williams doesn't need that. Not at all. Cat Williams didn't need that 10 years ago. So why does he think he needs that now? I don't think it comes from a weird. I don't think he has any beef against Rogan necessarily. I just don't think it's his gig. I don't think it's his. I don't think he needs the Joe Rogan audience, and I don't think he thinks he needs the Joe Rogan audience. And I would argue that through all of the adversity that Cat Williams has gone through, I don't think he's ever needed it. You know, when he fought a fucking middle schooler and it was on the internet, went viral, and he recovered from that. He didn't need Joe Rogan for that. Like some of these guys get canceled, and I'm using air quotes there, and they go on Joe Rogan and talk about it. This dude fought a child on the internet. Like for real. Like it's just like it didn't even make a dent in his career.
Yeah.
So I also think that he likely a lot of the guys that go on that show and are friends with Joe and talk about well, look, here's the difference between them and Cat. And I'm going to use an example, Bert Kreischer. Okay. If you've paid attention to Bert Kreischer over the last few years, and I've said this on our show, he loves to talk about himself. And he takes any opportunity when he's on a microphone and there are other people acknowledging his funny or his ability or anything that he's done, he runs with it. And he almost turns the conversation into a therapy session for himself. Cat Williams doesn't. That's not how Cat Williams operates. And I would argue largely that the vast majority of the urban comedy community that you would lump in with Cat Williams don't operate that way either. So they don't necessarily need to go on a show like Joe Rogan and talk about their feelings and talk about why comedy is so sacred to them and this and that. I don't I think Cat I think Katt holds comedy sacred, but he's going to talk shit. He's not going to talk
Yeah.
about his feelings, clearly. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. It gave it, well, definitely it gave everyone something to talk about, but at the same time, it made you think. This guy's been doing it a long time. He's been at every level of the industry, whether it be Hollywood, whether it be stand up, whether it be TV, whatever. How much of this is true? So,
Well, as he kept saying, like all these guys are gonna come back. Like
yeah,
they're gonna, and Shannon Sharp was like, I don't think so. Like he's like, you're calling them out hard. Like I don't think I think they're going to stay away from this. He's like, no, they're going to backtrack. They're going to come on here and they're going to want to try to change the story and fit their own narrative. And unless they can't, I mean, if they can't, then why would you want to go back on a show and talk about something that you can't prove? So I don't
I
know.
I would say the two that he mentioned that really perhaps have a reason to talk about it on a public platform, such as Shannon Sharp's podcast, would be Cedric the Entertainer, because he
Yeah,
accused him of joke stealing. And then Steve Harvey, I mean, he basically said that Steve Harvey ripped his entire fucking act off of Mark Curry in a
yeah,
roundabout way. Steve Harvey's one of the most famous people on earth.
right.
So for him to say that and Steve Harvey not address it would be maybe a good move on Steve Harvey's part, but it wouldn't hurt if he did. But Steve Harvey's not necessarily now, anyway, known for his stand up or
Exactly.
known.
That's what I was going to say. Like, do you think that he he doesn't need to go on there and try to save face because what he does isn't stand up anymore anyways. I don't think that the career that he has now that people are going to go back and be like, "Oh, well, I need to double check this and see if, he actually did steal jokes or, take
Yeah,
an entire set from someone else or anything like that." Dude, you host Family Feud. Like, we're not worried
yeah.
about that anymore.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the one person's take, and we don't have to look it up because it would, it's a lot. But Gary Owen had the most interesting. Well, he had the take that I found the most interesting on this because Gary Owen knows Steve Harvey, he knows Cedric, he knows Katt, but Gary Owen's very much known for being the nice guy, and he'll play the role of who he is, and he doesn't talk shit about anybody. He called out Monique way back, yeah, a couple years ago because, well, it was because she talked shit about a producer of a couple of movies he was in, basically calling him like a sexual abuser or whatever.
Gotcha.
And he kind of came to his defense and he got shit on for that. A lot of people didn't like that because he was a white guy talking about a black woman. But Gary Owen, he didn't choose sides on it. He's like, I know all these guys and here's my take on this. And he talked about how, he was asked to be on the Steve Harvey talk show and kind of got screwed out of it and he eventually just walked away from it. But he's like, hey, I'm not blaming Steve. So I want to make this very clear. So he toes the line, but I think if you followed his career and you know who he is, and he probably knows more so than a lot of people. But Katt Williams even talked about how, like, well, that's why Gary Owen hasn't crossed over. That's why you don't see his specials on Netflix. That's why he still only has a black audience. It's because he hasn't played the game. He's been true to himself and he doesn't bend over for anybody. I mean, I guess that's a compliment, maybe, but I'm sure Gary Owen would be like, can I get some Netflix money, please? Like, Gary Owen just put out a podcast today where he talked about he filmed two specials in the same weekend. So he's going to put one out and then wait a little bit and put out the other. And he's like, yeah, Netflix, he's like, I'll put out these specials and they don't even make it in the room at Netflix. And he's like, maybe because of the boom my social media got because I was mentioned during this Katt Williams rant and the views my videos are getting now, maybe Netflix will be interested. He's like, if they are, fine. If they aren't, great. I have my audience, I have my thing. So you have to love when guys take that approach too. Like he's not he talked about how like some people on the internet, of course, are like, oh, you're using this Katt Williams thing to your advantage. I'm like, why wouldn't I? He talked about me.
Right. Exactly.
But he didn't talk shit. He
Right.
just acknowledged the fact that yeah, he said this about me and here's why I agree. Like I said, he all of his shows are sold out. It's like massive shows and he's adding more. So I think he knew what he was doing. I could be wrong. Maybe he was just like, I've had a sip of Hennessy or whatever they were drinking. Let me go ahead and talk some shit. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, in the vein of comedy, still, have you watched Dave Chappelle's new special yet?
No, man.
Oh, you haven't?
No,
Oh, dude. Okay,
no. I'm sorry.
we'll hold off then. We'll talk about it at a later date. But
Yeah, we got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I gotta watch it.
okay,
I've seen mixed reviews. I know you said that he went hard.
so I've only talked to you about it like when I was about 5 minutes into the show. I'm not going to give you my review on it until after you've seen it.
Okay. Fair
So
enough.
I don't want to give you I don't know. Sometimes me and you agree really well, and sometimes we're on opposite sides of the spectrum. So I don't want to know until you've watched it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of stand-up comedy, did you see? I mean, I posted a clip because I took, I was watching the Golden Globes and you made fun of me for it. But to be honest with you, the only reason I was watching is because for the first time ever, they had a stand-up comedy award, essentially. And so the whole reason I got pulled into this is because Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura talked about it on their podcast, like, hey, nominate us. We'll appreciate this more than the other guys will. And I thought it was really cheesy and kind of lame.
Hang on. Did you just see a clip of that, or were you actually listening to their podcast?
It was a clip.
Oh, okay.
They posted a clip. Yeah, they cut up a clip of them talking about how it would be better if they were nominated for this because they would appreciate it more than Trevor Noah or Ricky Gervais. And Ricky Gervais, so it was Ricky Gervais, Trevor Noah, Chris Rock, Amy Schumer, Sarah Silverman, and Wanda Sykes.
Is Amy? I'm not. This isn't supposed to be a knock. I'm just curious because I haven't really heard her name much. Is Amy Schumer still like a big name in comedy right now?
Yeah, I mean, big enough to get nominated for a Golden Globe. I mean, but she's also on the Hollywood side of
Okay.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
business, you know, so and so is Chris Rock. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so Ricky Gervais won and he didn't even show up. It's like you had this first time thing. If you're the Golden Globes, why don't you just, hey, and he's had his history with the Golden Globes through hosting, and he had that whole thing that he did a couple of years ago where he basically called out all of Hollywood for being pedophiles and shitheads. But
Right.
like if you know you're going to give it to him, call him and be like, "Hey, we want to give it to you. Will you show up and accept this award because it's the first time it's ever happening? It would probably, I don't know, make a good impression for you and your peers that you're there. Go hard on everybody
Right.
when you accept, but just be there." And he's not there. It's give it to somebody who's going to show up. And I'm not saying anything negative about Ricky Gervais. I like Ricky Gervais. I think he's funny, and I did watch that special that was nominated. But it's like, why did you even do it if the first time you ever do it, the person's not there? Give the comedian the chance to get up there and be funny.
I mean, yes, but there's probably other aspects involved. I mean, you can't just put the Golden Globes on a day that you know that Ricky Gervais can be there. You know what I mean? I mean, he could be doing anything, any number of things
Well,
to
look, you
not
call and
be
say,
able to
hey, we
make
want
it.
to give the award to you. Can you be there? No. All right, we're going to give it to Trevor Noah, or we're going to give it to
Well,
Sarah
I don't
Silverman.
know if that's the best route to go either. Just give it to a person that can make it.
Yeah,
If
but
they
here's my
didn't
point.
deserve it,
My point is this it's the first time,
I see
okay?
what you're saying. Yeah.
The first time you have someone there get up there, represent the community, and be funny. Now, Jim Gaffigan presented the award. He was funny, called people pedophiles, which I thought was great, but he didn't win the award.
Right. Do you like Jim Gaffigan?
Yeah,
I mean, I know
I
he's
don't dislike him.
his stand up comedy is very corny, and I get it, and that's his shtick. But I've heard him on like quite a few podcasts too. I like him as a person. Like he's a very real person
Yeah,
behind
he
the
seems like
comedy.
yeah, I mean, he seems like a down to earth guy.
Yeah.
Played college football, seems like a normal guy. I don't know. I don't know if that's normal, but so my point is, it's the first time. Have somebody be there that can accept and make an
I agree.
impression for the stand up community. I just thought it was so shitty. Also, I had to sit through half the goddamn award show to get to that point too. So I don't, you know. Speaking of which, Joe Coy, who I am not a fan of. Are you a fan of him?
Not really. I haven't heard. I've only heard okay things. Like apparently you could definitely tell he was nervous as hell.
Oh, yeah. But he did a couple of things that really annoyed me. The first thing he did was he he talked about his race. It's like he just let's just beat that into the ground as much as we can. Then he talked about how he didn't write all of the jokes and the only ones that are funny are the ones that he wrote. And I thought that was shitty. I didn't like that at all. Some people liked it. Some people were like, yeah, if I got this on 10 days notice, I would call out people for writing me shitty jokes too. I'm like, I don't know, man. Just fucking if they don't work, they don't work. I don't think he bombed like people said that he did. I don't think he was funny by any means. He called out Taylor Swift and she didn't seem to appreciate it. So I enjoyed that. But the joke was like a layup. It was like something about the NFL, and good news is we're not going to cut to Taylor Swift as much as the NFL is right now, or something like that. And they cut to her and she's like taking a sip of wine and she like had this sort of like scowl on her face. I was like, ugh, all around gross.
Yeah.
But also, I know the answer to this, but have you seen Barbie?
No.
Okay. So it was nominated for a couple of things, and I was I heard people talk about the movie about how it was much more than just this sort of playful, lighthearted, it's a Barbie movie. Like it was more about the patriarch and how she's going to take down the patriarch and this and that.
So, okay, so I have had a very, very tiny interest in actually watching it,
Okay.
just because I have heard people say like good things about it.
Yeah.
Um, then today I actually listened to Mark Maron podcast, and he had the is it the producer that Greta, what's her name?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Um,
I know who you're talking about. I
yeah,
don't remember though.
he had her on the show recently, and she was explaining like everything that went into the movie, and now I don't want to watch it. I don't want to have to go into watch a Barbie movie and think about how deep they go on all of this. Like why? It's a Barbie movie. Why do we need why would I want to go to a movie and have to think about,
Because we're men and we're pieces of shit and we need to think about what we've done wrong, Colt.
well, of course we are.
Of course, we're pieces of shit or we're men or both.
Both.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a clip and heard somebody. It was like a comment. It was commentary of it, and she like makes the Kens go to war to sort of make up for the fact that that's what we've done. Is just start wars throughout history, and it's my God. It's fine. It's fine. I understand what you're trying to do. Not for me. I don't care.
And
It's the same reason. It's the
I'm not
same
dogging
reason.
on it. I'm just saying it's, as you
Well,
said, it's
I'm kind of dogging on it, but I won't. But it's the same reason I don't watch like slave movies. It seems like every couple of years there's like a movie, like a slave movie, a historical period piece about slaves that comes out, and this makes me a shithead, but I don't want to watch it. Not a movie, like a fictional piece of thing. I don't want to watch it. Like a documentary, sure, if I'm in the right mood. I just
yeah.
don't like 12 Years a Slave. Like I haven't seen that. I don't know that I'm ever going to see that movie. Might make me a bad person, but whatever.
Well, I mean, I mean, we can both respect what it is.
Of course. I'm not saying it's not
But
important. It's just
yeah,
I just
yeah,
prefer not to watch.
right, exactly.
Yes. Woo.
Okay, let's move on to something else.
Yeah, please.
Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers and Pat McAfee. Did you talk about Aaron? You talked about Aaron Rodgers a little bit on last week's episode, right?
I did.
Okay,
I talked about
so
him bringing up Jimmy Kimmel's name for really no reason other than being a shithead and a shit disturber, like I've said he always has been.
there's one clip where Pat McAfee is talking about Aaron Rodgers has been basically, I guess, released from the show for at least until the end of the season.
Is it the Inside Edition clip?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's been on the show, I think, like every Tuesday for a
Yeah.
while now. And now they're trying to play it up. The media is trying to play it up like Pat McAfee is so glad that they've got rid of him and this, that, and the other. And I don't think that has anything to do with anything. I think they're just making it look that way.
Yeah.
However, I'm not opposed to it. I don't listen to the Pat McAfee show. I do like Pat McAfee, but especially with this, Aaron Rodgers is just on. I don't have. I've always tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Even on this show, when me and you have talked about him, you are always the hater on him, and I've always
Yeah.
tried to give him kind of the benefit of the doubt. And now it just, I don't know. Just lately, it just seems like he is what most people say he is.
Well, here's the thing, man. Before I play the clip, the one thing that I said that I think is an important distinction that everyone needs to make. He can go on any show and say what he wants and suffer the consequences or face the backlash. The biggest problem that I have is that it's Pat McAfee's show and he doesn't call him on it. He doesn't ask, well, why Jimmy Kimmel? Why did that name come out of your mouth? And that's the point I made on the last show. I feel like it's very irresponsible on Pat McAfee's part and the rest of his staff's part to not question why these things are being said. Because at the end of the day, that show is no different than the show you and I are doing right now. If you're not going to question your guests about the things they're saying on your show, well, then it's not a news show. It's not a commentary show. It's just simply guys talking shit. That's all it is.
Right.
But
And
he's towed the line as to being called a journalist and wanting to be called a journalist. And, they have this disclaimer on a show like the things we're saying are our opinions, don't sue us. We're just guys being guys. But it's like, are you?
right.
You're on ESPN. You
Right.
signed a contract. You know that you have bosses now. You're a company man now.
Yeah.
So if you want to be the
Check your
company
bank account.
man, yeah. But if you want to be the company man for the world's largest sports network where people are supposed to question things, because that's what journalism is. That's what journalists do. They question everything. Then you would do that on your show, and you would do this to this guy, but he didn't. So
Right. And now I didn't watch that whole episode or anything, but from the clips that I've seen and whether they're just trying to make it look that way or not, it just seems like he pulled the name Jimmy Kimmel out of nowhere, right?
pretty much.
Like they weren't even talking about Jimmy Kimmel, and he pulled his name out of nowhere, talking about the Epstein list.
Yeah, and that's the thing I said. I don't know if he has some sort of beef with Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know where that came from. And I did obviously did not do the research to find that out. I mean, I haven't
Well,
seen anything that linked him to him. You know, when Jimmy Kimmel made his statement, there was no sort of like, here's the history between this.
so
It
what,
just was said.
what's your thoughts on Jimmy Kimmel's reply?
Was necessary.
Do you think the threat of lawsuit was necessary?
Well, I thought that was a little bit maybe premature, because it was a throwaway line during a show, but obviously went viral, or had the potential to go really viral if people kept talking about it.
I
So
mean,
maybe you get ahead of it, but I don't
we're
know.
talking about something huge. I mean, I understand it was a throwaway line, yeah, but yes, it went viral, and Kimmel even said like, "You're like, this isn't just me, this is my family that you're putting at risk for saying something like that."
Right.
And I mean, like I said, that's huge. Like that's a huge thing, especially with that list supposedly was supposed to be coming out, which I guess everybody overreacted on that too. It wasn't the
Yeah.
actual list; it was just some people that were intertwined in it, I guess. But
Yeah, I
anyways,
mean, I think if you're Jimmy Kimmel, you get ahead of it and you respond. Threatening lawsuits, it's 2024, kind of the norm at this point, right? I
I
don't know.
guess.
Has been sacked just one day after his non-apology to Jimmy Kimmel. Rogers has been given the boot from Pat McAfee's popular ESPN show. And among those who say they are pleased is McAfee himself.
Bye-bye, Aaron Rodgers. ESPN sports personality Pat McAfee is done with the drama, announcing today that Aaron Rodgers would not appear on his show for the rest of the football season. And he sounded relieved.
I'm pumped that is no longer going to be every single Wednesday of my life.
McAfee says he believes that his viewers will be delighted.
That's bogus.
Yeah, that was cut up.
I hate that so much.
That was cut up. That was
And
bullshit.
if you can't read what just happened, it's gross.
Yeah, fuck Inside Edition. That was irresponsible. Look, just say that he might be relieved, and he might be.
Right.
He might be. You know, eventually things get bigger than you, so you have to cut your losses. But yeah, to cut it up like that is bullshit. I don't know. Here we go.
The news
I think they do
that
it
Rodgers won't appear anymore.
There's going to be a lot of people that are happy with that, myself included, to be honest. With the way it ended, it got real loud. And real loud. I'm happy that is not going to be my mentions going forward, which is great news.
Rodgers' last appearance was Tuesday when he sidestepped an apology to Jimmy Kimmel after suggesting last week that Kimmel might be on a list of associates of convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Turns out Kimmel was not on any list.
As long as he understands what I actually said, and that I'm not accusing him of being on a list, I'm not stupid enough to accuse you of that with absolutely zero evidence.
There was widespread disbelief that a show on ESPN would go after a top ABC personality like Kimmel.
Isn't that exactly what he did? Like that apology
Yeah.
is bullshit. Like did exactly what you're kind of sidestepping away from.
Yeah, he's a dummy. Like, and that's my you know what you're doing by having him on and talking about these. You know that's his character now. That's the guy he is. He brings up these things. He talks about these things, and it stirs up controversy. That's why you have him on. Does he have some insight about football? Sure. Does he have some insight about reacting to the NFL and being able to add commentary where it needs to be? Sure. But at the end of the day, you know what this is. Everyone knows what this is.
And ABC are owned by Disney.
It's hard for me to believe that ESPN didn't really put a whole lot
I can't stand this guy, by the way.
of pressure
I did
on
know
making.
I follow him on Twitter. He's one of these guys that everything is not everything, but a lot of the things that he says and reports, and he has a very condescending way about him that just drives me nuts. That's honestly, that's sports commentary, sports journalism these days. You have to There's no, like, let's just state the facts. It's gotta be, you have to put your own spin on it. You have to put your own thing. Can't you just say what it is and just move on? Like, do you really need the extra 1,500 clicks on your Twitter post? I don't know.
This happened, and it was not a sole decision from Pat McAfee.
The Aaron Rodgers controversy has been the talk of the airwaves. Charles Barkley weighed in on
Hang on.
CBS
Hey,
Mornings
pause
today.
it. Did you? Oh my God. Rewind like 5 seconds and pause it. Right there. That's good. Do you read that? Aaron Rodgers, Super Bowl champ, 4-time NFL MVP, ayahuasca enthusiast.
That's what Pat McAfee has on his show.
What?
That's from the Pat McAfee show.
He puts that on there? Why? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's goofy.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
So that means he's a fucking quack, but that's fine.
Rodgers controversy has been the talk of the airwaves. Charles Barkley weighed in on CBS Mornings today.
If Aaron Rodgers had said that about you, implied that you had been on the Epstein list, how would you handle that?
I'd have punched him in the face.
ESPN tells us cutting Aaron Rodgers was Pat.
I love that. I love that. Also, is Charles Barkley's face falling?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you notice that?
Yeah, he's looking odd these days. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't like Aaron Rodgers. I didn't like him as a football player. I didn't like the things I heard about him as a football player. I don't like him as just a dude in society talking about the things around us. I don't.
Did you see the whole the Super Bowl conspiracy that he put out there too?
No.
So he said a couple weeks ago, I think, he said that he didn't exactly say that the Super Bowl is predetermined, but he kind of did, because he said if you look at the logo and the colors of the logo, it shows you who is going to be in the Super Bowl.
So what are the colors this year?
Purple and red. So everybody's assuming it's going to be Baltimore and San Fran. 2 years ago, the color was yellow and orange, and it was the Rams in Cincinnati.
Rams in Cincinnati. Yep.
And then last year it was red and green.
Chiefs
Kansas City
and
in Philadelphia.
well, yeah.
It's kind of weird. I don't know. I'm just saying I don't fall into the scripted theory, but that does hold a little. I mean, it's a little odd. Now I haven't gone back farther than that to see if it always holds up, but those 3 years is pretty interesting, and it could definitely be Baltimore and San Fran this year for sure.
When the Browns win the Super Bowl this year, I'm going to tell you and Aaron Rodgers to eat shit. Okay, let me just say that. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's interesting. I don't know. That's not something I want to look into, because I don't ever want to believe that any major sporting event like that is fixed. Ever. And even if it came out that it was, I would still be like, nah, it's fine. I would treat it like professional wrestling. Like, it's not predetermined.
I have, for the longest, I've been contemplating this for a long time, and I'm the same way as you. I don't want to even think that it's possible that anything could be rigged in that way.
No.
But and the reason I say that is because there would have to be so many people involved for that to happen. But
yeah.
But as negligent as refs have been in the past few years, and as horrible of calls as you see, it makes you wonder, dude. Like that whole Detroit and Dallas game, and the eligible player, and that they took that game away from the Lions. The Lions won that game. Like stuff like that, but also for a game to get that close and to have an ending like that, it's almost impossible to make. You know what I mean? For everything.
That's going to be my point. You can't fix something just based on one individual play or one individual bad call. You would have to fix the entire thing. The entire thing would have to be scripted.
Yeah, you can't make it come down to a 2-point conversion. There's no way.
No way. You can't. Yeah, I mean look, if everybody's in on it, I guess you could. Smoking Joe ain't gonna be in on shit. That's what I can tell you. The world's greatest quarterback ain't fixing shit. All right, just letting you know.
But also, if you think about like the take like the New England and Atlanta, the 27-3 Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that that was supposed to go that way. There's no possible way in the world that you can just say, okay, well, Atlanta's just gonna not do anything now, and New England's gonna score, 30 straight points or whatever it was.
Yeah, I'll give you a better one. How about the Rams versus the Patriots? The Super Bowl that the Rams lost to the Patriots, and they
Yeah.
literally, it was because they didn't give the ball to Marshall Faulk. Like
Yeah.
they would show replays where there's like, oh, there's a clear lane. There's a clear lane. Why aren't they handing off? Why aren't they handing the ball off? Why aren't they? I mean, I just think at the end of the day, it
But
comes to
but then
making.
but then you also have games like the Seahawks where they didn't give the ball to Marshawn Lynch, and Russell Wilson tried to throw.
Well, that's my point. It's like I don't think that is a work. I just think it's poor judgment
I know,
in
I agree.
crucial times where you need to make the best decisions, and you didn't make the best decision. That's what I want to believe. Anyway,
Yeah.
the Seahawks one is bad. That one was bad. I didn't even watch that. I was actually in the recording studio during that Super Bowl, and I had a little like thing on my phone giving me like live updates. I remember we're in there, and I just remember thinking, oh, they're driving, they're gonna win. The Marshawn Lynch, they're gonna win, they're gonna win, they're gonna win. And I just remember we're doing some conversation. And I looked at my phone. They lost. I was like, how the fuck did they lose? So we went out to a TV and like, no, I'm sorry, not a TV, a computer, and went to YouTube and found somebody's replay. And we're like, oh my goodness, that is just.
Straight for you.